Dear President Biden,
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 Dear President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the 117th Congress, as you begin your work leading us, let us recognize that these are days of challenge and sorrow. The pandemic has cost too many lives. Racial injustice continues to harm the marginalized. Economic injustice tears at the fabric of our communities. These are terrible and terrifying days for so many. These are also days of courage and hope. Nurses, support staff, and doctors have healed the sick and comforted the dying. Protesters have called for justice. Millions have voted with love for their neighbors and hope for a better future. These are promising, hopeful days in so many ways. Now, we have called you to a higher purpose, to repair what has been broken, to heal the wounds that have festered in the midst of political neglect, to call us to a unity too long forsaken, to embody a politics in which belonging, justice, and love crowd out fear, self-interest, and the vain pursuit of power. Of course, you know too well that no politician can deliver on such promises. Those politicians who think they can promise what only God can deliver delude themselves and harm the nation. Those politicians who claim only they can solve our problems put themselves on a throne that only God can fill. The Christian scriptures help us imagine what it might feel like to live in the shadow of God's extravagant grace, to live in a kingdom only God can inaugurate. The end of grief, Revelation 21:4, an answer to creation's groaning for redemption, Romans 8:22, the liberation of the imprisoned, Luke 4:18, blessings to the poor, Matthew 5:3. So, what are we calling you to do? The words of Jesus call us to love our neighbors, Luke 10:27, and to care for those we tend to harm with our neglect, Luke 9:48. To meet this high calling, we all need the help of our neighbors and a force larger than any one politician's ambitions. So believe the promises that God has made. Trust that God will accompany you when you make good on our hopes and call you to repair when you have broken, when you fall short. In these terrible and promising, terrifying and hopeful days, may you lead us with faith, hope, and love. Sincerely, Reverend Dr. Eric D. Barreto, Frederick and Margaret L. Weyerhaeuser, Associate Professor of New Testament, Princeton Theological Seminary.
I'm David Bradley, and that was actor, playwright, and educator Nalaja Sun reading a letter from American Values, Religious Voices, written by Eric D. Barreto. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Nalaja. And welcome to Dear President Biden. So glad to have you with us. It's my honor to have directed tonight's event and to host tonight with Rabbi Andrea L. Weiss, who's the Jack Joseph and Morton Mendel Provost and Associate Professor of Bible at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. Rabbi Weiss founded this visionary campaign, along with co-founder and creative director Lisa Weinberger, also the creative director at Masters Group Design. American Values, Religious Voices, 100 Days, 100 Letters, is a national, nonpartisan campaign that for 100 days, January 20th to April 29th, is sending a letter a day to President Biden, to Vice President Harris, and members of the 117th Congress, just as it sent 100 letters to President Trump, Vice President Pence, and members of the 115th Congress in 2017. The letters bring the voices of Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh scholars to the ears and inboxes of our national leaders and to followers across the country, calling upon Americans to live up to the nation's highest ideals. You can see the letters and subscribe to get one in your inbox every morning at valuesandvoices.com. These are letters of illumination and challenge, empathy and action. Through them all, we hear the scholars, yes, speaking truth to power, but also, as Randy Woodley says in his letter, speaking truth in love. Today, President's Day, we're gathering, hundreds of us, coast to coast. I see 3 countries in the chat. I see at least 12 states, and I lost count. Here's how the event will work. It's fabulous that we've gathered together, and I'm seeing messages of peace, I'm seeing messages of glad to be here, I'm seeing messages of hope in the chat. Together, all of us, all these states, all these countries, we'll listen to 5 letters from American Values, Religious Voices, and hear 2 brand new songs written just for tonight and inspired by several letters. And midway through, we'll hear back from Congress as U.S. Congressman Dwight Evans, Democrat from Pennsylvania, joins us to offer a brief response to one of the letters. And after the final song, we'll have a chance to join a conversation about how these letters from different faith perspectives can encourage our own action. Now, on a more mundane matter of faith, we of course have great faith in all that Zoom is going to do for us tonight, right? As our readers are joining us from their homes or their dorm rooms, these 11 months have taught us nothing if not adaptation. So we know we got to be ready to roll with however technology turns the tides. And so I hope you're ready to roll too. I want to say that we're so grateful to our ASL interpreters, Donna Ellis from Philadelphia's Hands Up Productions and Brandis Mazik, who will interpret this evening. And thanks to Sherry Smargan, who's our captioner tonight. You can access the captioning with closed caption at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. If you need any assistance, please use the chat to send a direct message to House Manager Sophia. We want to keep the chat kind of clear for those messages, so help with that while you also keep your cameras and mics off. For best viewing, you can turn off non-video participants in your video settings. And to see some videos better, go to the top right of your Zoom screen where it says view and put it on standard. You'll see the videos a little better. So, the new administration and Congress, and each of us, focuses on all that's ahead. The letters offer hope. But let's remember, as Rabbi Dr. Rachel S. Mikva says, hope is not idle optimism that all will turn out for the best, but active faith that the world can be different than it is. This event's an act of faith, many faiths, but it's also, as Rabbi Mikva says, active faith, that through our words, from our heritages, and maybe most importantly, by listening to the miraculous multiplicity in our country, that e pluribus we lift up, we can make that more perfect union we all seek. Or as our next reader said of Values and Voices, how can we encourage a politics of empathy and fairness? One just, kind, compassionate, equitable word at a time. Please welcome, reading a letter from Mark Z. Bretler via video because he's driving across the country safely right now, actor David Strathairn.
Dear President Biden, Vice President Harris, and members of the 117th Congress. 4 years ago, after the election results were announced, I wrote 2 biblical quotations in Hebrew on my office door so that I would see them daily, be reminded of their truth, and be spurred to action. The first was from Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 20, which should be translated as, quote, after justice must you chase. Zedek, Zedek, tirdof. Most English translations miss how emphatic this command is. It repeats justice twice. As the medieval Jewish commentator Abraham ibn Ezra notes, this doubling implies that you must act justly time after time, whether it is to your advantage or disadvantage. The word I translated as chase is often incorrectly rendered less forcefully as follow or pursue, but it's a very physical running word. You do and should get tired from such sprinting, but it is essential to keep running after justice and to call out and to redress injustice wherever you may find it. My second quote is more tranquil and aims to counterbalance the frenetic image of the first. Quote, love, truth, and shalom. Zechariah chapter 8, verse 19. While guiding the Jews to recover from a traumatic national calamity, the prophet Zechariah was an optimist, proclaiming in one of my favorite Bible passages, quote, there shall yet be old men and women in the squares of Jerusalem, each with staff in hand, because of their great age, and the squares of the city shall be crowded with boys and girls playing in the squares. Zechariah chapter 8, verses 4 and 5. But this new society must be based on truth and shalom. Typically, that last word is translated as peace, which we so desperately hope for in these turbulent times. But its meaning here is personal well-being or wholeness, the main responsibility of government. Only through such wholeness can the young and old enjoy and benefit from life. I believe that sections of all the world's scriptures, including the Hebrew Bible, my scripture, have the ability to heal. May this administration use scriptures well, to chase justice and to love the truth, supporting the well-being and peace for all of us. I look forward to the day when this happens. When it does, I will no longer need these Bible verses as a reminder on my office door. Shalom. Mark Zvi Bretler, Bernice and Morton Lerner, Distinguished Professor in Judaic Studies, Duke University.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark. Our next letter by Muslim scholar Hussein Rashid features a combo of readers, young adults who represent the future, each in their own ways. We'll begin on video with Salawat Adam. Originally from the Sudan, Salawat's a resident of Philadelphia and a sophomore at Penn State Abington campus, where she's also a tutor of Arabic. And we not only welcome Salawat's voice tonight, we get to welcome it to our national fabric in a new way. Let's look at that photo. In that photo, you saw Salawat on the right, with her mom Salson Obeid and her dad Khalid Adam, right about a week ago after becoming brand new US citizens. We send our congratulations to Salson, Khalid, and Salawat. And then following Salawat, reading the second half of Hussein Rashid's letter from a dorm room on the campus of George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where he's a junior, will be Zachary Nosenchuk. A native of Shaker Heights, Ohio, Zachary's been regional vice president for the Reformed Jewish Youth Movement and is vice chair of the George Washington Student Task Force on fighting anti-Semitism. And in 2020, Zachary cast his first vote for president. We begin on video with Salawat.
Dear President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the member of the 117th Congress, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. May God's peace, mercy, and blessing be with you. In the 7th century, Imam Ali ibn Abu Talib, successor to the Prophet Muhammad's religious and political authority, wrote a letter about good governance. This letter is recognized through history as a model for good leadership. Although it is grounded in a Muslim ethical worldview, it is broadly applicable in practice. One of the points of the letter that I would like to bring to your attention is this line: a nation in which the rights of the weak are not wrested in uninhibited manner from strong will never be blessed.
And now we have Zachary Nosenchuk for the second half of Hussein Rashid's letter.
Imam Ali quotes this sentence from Prophet Muhammad as the Imam develops what this teaching means in practice. He says a good leader should pay attention to, quote, the lowest class, those who have no wherewithal, the destitute, the needy, the afflicted, the disabled. Be mindful of God in regard to their rights, for God has entrusted these rights to your care, end quote. The lesson here is that you need to be most available to those who have no access to you. They are the ones you are entrusted to care for. The Imam continues to remind us that when the majority of society is well cared for, society functions well, and the elite benefit. But when only the elite are cared for, society falls apart. As Imam Ali says, the elite are not helpful in trials. None are more repelled by justice, nor less grateful. Following Imam Ali's letter, I implore you to remember those whom we would rather forget. Make them the focus of this administration. May Allah bless us all. Salam, Hussein Rashid, independent scholar and itinerant preacher.
Thank you, Salawat. Thank you, Zachary. Thank you, Hussein Rashid. And it's now my pleasure to invite to join us here on screen to offer a brief response to Hussein Rashid's letter, U.S. Congressman Dwight Evans, Democrat from Pennsylvania, and Salawat's home city of Philadelphia. Welcome, Congressman Evans.
Thank you, David. And thank you for the opportunity to offer my comments. This is a very appropriate period. It is meeting a moment. And I don't believe when I first got elected that I ever believed that it would be a situation such as the moment we are in. And as a result of meeting that moment, the question is, which I've asked myself consistently, is did I have the necessary skill set to meet that moment? i.e. with the person who was elected as president and with a pandemic, which obviously I've never experienced like this in my entire life. So with the combination of the political environment, the public health environment, and the economic environment, when you look at the three combination, the question is, was I, who was in this process, and others, able to address and meet that moment? The political environment, the public health environment, and the economic environment. So, though, as the comment was made earlier, there is no one who is in elected office who has that, who think they and themselves can do that. But what I've heard is through a process of listening, which I think is extremely essential, we have tried to do the best that we could do. So I share with you, after listening to what I've heard, all these comments help contribute to my thinking and my own development and finding some way to address, not just in the United States of America, but the question is the entire world. That is the essential aspect that we attempt to do. So I hope that I have, just a short period of time that I've been, I hope I have been in some way able to contribute in a positive, spiritual, governmental way to addressing the unfairness and the unequal aspect that we have in the way that our government works. And the results are still out. But I think projects such as what you have here is something, in my view, and my short period of time, I've only been in Congress, this is my 5th year, very short. It is what is needed because it is more that we talk to each other and listen to each other that we will be able to address the injustice and the inadequacies that have been occurring. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Evans. We really appreciate you being with us tonight, and thank you for your work and all the work you'll do ahead and your long service to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the United States. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that idea of listening and meeting the moment, that's what we're moving on with tonight, and that's what we'll get a chance to do as we talk a little bit later. But our thanks to Zachary and to Salawat and to Hussein Rashid and to Congressman Evans. Intercollection Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings. The 2019 US Poet Laureate Joy Harjo of the Muskogee Creek Nation has this little prose poem. When I woke up from a 40-year sleep, it was by a song. I could hear the drums in the village. I felt the sweat of ancestors in each palm. The singers were singing the world into place, even as it continued to fall apart. They were making songs to turn hatred into love. So let's turn to song. Songwriter Ami Yaris has used his music to bring together Palestinian and Israeli youth, to lift up the voices of immigrants and refugees with Highest Pennsylvania, and as executive director of Build a Bridge International. He created a new song just for tonight, inspired by several Values and Voices letters. Lisa Bowen's letter number 3 from January 2nd, and the phrase in that letter, "In the words we speak, in the lives we lead." Anantan Rambashan's letter number 5 from January 24th, in this line, "Lead us from untruth to truth. Lead us from darkness to light." And Kimberly D. Russaw's letter number 17 from February 5th, in this line, "For the people had a mind to work." Ami's joined in this song by collaborator Bethlehem the Vocationist, who, among many other things, has spent this pandemic making songs with parents and infants as part of Carnegie Hall and World Cafe Live's Lullaby Project. Here are Ami and Bethlehem with the world premiere of Can't Keep Truth Locked Away.
Unfurl the past like an old map. Look from where we came, look at where we're at. A path dependent we seem to be. Our sins repeat at the risk of losing everything.
Chains can break and bonds unbound. We'll shake the shackles, rattle the cage, 'cause you can't keep truth locked away. We'll shake the shackles, rattle the cage, 'cause you can't keep truth locked away. No, you can't keep truth locked away.
Untruth to truth, darkness to light. Unveil the beauty that sits between the eyes. Don't let their lies burden your load. Truth moves in you and will keep you strong.
Words have weight, and the chains can break. We'll shake the shackles, rattle the cage, 'cause you can't keep truth locked away. We'll shake the shackles, rattle the cage, 'cause you can't keep truth locked away. No, you can't keep truth locked away.
You see the people here got the mind to work. Kick the dirt from this hurt. Let your love show for the world.
Words have weight, and these chains can break. We'll shake the shackles out of the cage, 'cause we can't keep truth Lock the way. We shake the shackles, rattle the cage, 'cause you can't keep your rules. Lock the way, no, you can't keep your rules. Lock the way, no, you can't keep your rules. Lock the way, no, you can't keep your rules. Lock the way, no, you can't keep your rules. Lock the way, no, you can't keep your rules. Locked away.
Dear President Biden, Vice President Harris, and members of the 117th Congress, recent events in our beloved country have exposed the frailty of much that we have taken for granted. At this time of crisis, we need courageous and creative leadership. The Jewish Bible, Old Testament, was born in response to catastrophe and defeat. In the face of devastation, some refused to give up hope and set about the task of reimagining what it means to be a people. In a collaborative effort that is breathtaking in both its scope and creative vision, the biblical authors imagined their separate pasts as one story. They were convinced that their rival communities could join together as one people. In asking what it means to be a people, they rethought every facet of their existence, setting forth a diverse curriculum for a new form of peoplehood. At its center are laws and statutes demanding love for neighbor and stranger. The intuition guiding this project of peoplehood is that a nation is only as strong as its weakest members. A people that fails to establish an equitable economy cannot endure, let alone be free. The line emblazoned on our Liberty Bell, "Proclaim liberty throughout the land," comes from the biblical book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 10. Many Americans consider it a call to independence, affirming the privilege of doing as one wishes, as long as it does not harm others. However, its biblical meaning is the opposite. Proclaim liberty means recognizing our interdependence and creating a socioeconomic safety net that prevents families from falling into irreversible poverty. At the center of the Torah and as the foundational text of Judaism, the book of Leviticus teaches that true liberty requires a new infrastructure and society, one that ensures that all, both citizen and stranger, have a secure dwelling place and means of livelihood. As Americans, we can aspire to nothing less. We call upon you to act with courage and creativity to establish this kind of liberty for all. This is a sacred task, and you can count on our support. Sincerely, Rabbi Tamara Cohn Eskenazi, the F.E. Weiss Oakes Professor of Biblical Literature and History, Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, and Jacob L. Wright, Associate Professor of Hebrew Bible, Emory University, Candler School of Theology.
Dear President Biden, Vice President Harris, and members of the 117th Congress, travel with me for a moment to a little chapel in Israel that was built to honor Jesus's Sermon on the Mount. Walk with me inside the chapel and look up to see the stained glass windows that depict the Beatitudes in Latin, the 8 blessings recounted by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. My favorite blessing is Beati Pacifici Quoniam Filii Dei Vocabantur, translated as, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be children of God." Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Each time I read that verse, I am challenged anew. Please let these words take residence in you, the way they reside in the glass on those windows. Let them work in your heart and mind. We are deeply entrenched in a moment where peacemaking seems like an exhausting upward climb with little reward. How do you remain committed to being a peacemaker when the times you are living in are far from peaceful? The images from the Capitol insurrection haunt me still. In Letter from Birmingham Jail, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. expresses his disappointment in, quote, the white moderate who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. King challenges us to see that suppressing tension to create a kind of peace is not peace at all. Often, justice calls for walking through tension, exposing inequity to establish a positive peace. Being a peacemaker requires the ability to discern truthfully the areas of conflict between different groups. Being a peacemaker calls for accountability and clear-eyed acknowledgement of the tensions before groups can be reconciled. As leaders, there will be temptations to smooth over the cracks in our nation caused by these tensions, to ignore them or cynically exploit them to divide others without hope for reconciliation. I urge you to follow the model of kintsugi, the Japanese art form that takes broken pottery and binds the cracks with gold glue. Kintsugi teaches us not to forget what broke us as a nation. It shows us that peacemaking is the glue needed to piece our country back together in gold. May the peacemaking process be gold. May it be beautiful and real. And may we give it lots of attention. May the peace that we feel be a positive peace, the holistic peace of shalom. Then, as peacemakers, you will be called children of God. Grateful for your commitment to peace, Leah C. Howard, Student Advising and Wellness Director, SNF Padea Program, University of Pennsylvania.
Right after Ami in Bethlehem, we heard from two accomplished actors who appeared on countless stages. Keisha Marie Canares read a letter from Tamara Cohn Eskenazi and Jacob L. Wright. And then following her, Michelle Tauber read Leah C. Howard's Charge for Peacemaking. Thank you all. If this were a concert, this might be where we'd introduce the band. Well, we don't have a band, but we've got a phenomenal production team on all kinds of wired and wireless connections making things go. You got no idea. John Brueggemann and Edgar Rivera are backing us up from Hebrew Union College. And then huge thanks to our fantastic stage management crew, Kate Fosner, and three sharp, generous, and dedicated women who are also part of the Small and Mighty Values and Voices team, Kayla Gilman, Sophia Sonnenfeld, and Rebecca Tauber. Amazing trio. And special thanks to Galia McGregor for her video production and editing. And now, with a letter from Murali Balahi. Please welcome actor, musician, and activist, Angel Desai.
Dear President Biden, Vice President Harris, and members of the 117th Congress, I write this letter to you with a heavy and prayerful heart. Our country is not only fiercely divided, but it is now on the precipice of losing the democratic values that have made it a beacon of light to the rest of the world. We have so many pieces to pick up from the last 4 years. The scriptures of many of the world's religions preach about the search for truth, however it may manifest. What has happened, however, is truth becomes subject to alternative interpretations. We've siloed ourselves in darkness, unable or unwilling to allow the light in. This moment, like 4 years ago, prompts me to ask, what can we do to create light together? Hindu scriptures speak of the role of dharma, righteous action for the greater good, in conquering wickedness and evil. There is the story of Prahlad, who remained steadfast in his faith that Dharma, Vishnu in the form of the lion deity Narasimhan, would conquer even the darkest of forces. Narasimhan killed the evil king Hiranyakashipu as a metaphor of light overcoming the darkness and restoring Dharma. Today, our Dharma compels us to rebuild this country. We must be full of faith as we work to ensure that the bonds that have kept this republic together are strengthened through mutual goodwill, pluralism, and respect. But for that to happen, our country needs to trust its political leaders again. This is why your roles are more important now than ever. Whether you supported the previous administration or not, your ability to understand that this country is more than just a sum of political bases will define how we as Americans move forward. Dharma is about striving for righteousness, even if it comes at a political cost. No seat is worth saving when you have strayed from Dharma and denied truth. I am hopeful our collective Dharma will help us to seize the moment to come together, and while acknowledging our differences, work to make this country get back on track towards a more perfect union. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Murali Balaji, founder of Maruti Education Consulting and lecturer at Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Murali, and thank you, Angel. So as a way of creating more light together, we'll rev up for our conversation with one more song, another piece created just for tonight by singer-songwriter Keisha Hutchins Herlinger, also a terrific educator and activist for diversity and racial justice. The lyrics of this song, We Are Bound, are drawn from the words and sentiments of these letters. Karma Lekshit Soma's letter number 77 from April 6th in the 2017 collections of letters, and the line, all happiness comes from cherishing others. All misery comes from cherishing oneself. The letter from Values and Voices founder Rabbi Andrea L. Weiss, which kicked off this year's campaign on January 20th, in which she has the lines, be strong and be of good courage. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and cause your heart to be resilient. Be courageous. Be kind. And finally, from Mark Z. Bretler's letter, number 4 this year, which David Strathairn read earlier this evening, after justice must you chase. And when Keisha finishes, it'll be your turn to respond to these letters in a conversation. Here's We Are Bound from Keisha Hutchins Herlinger.
I woke up breathless in my dream. We were running, chasing something that can't be denied. And I knew in that moment I was glad you were with me, because I knew this chase could change the tide. You said, be courageous, be strong, but most of all, be kind. You stood beside me in that moment. Your freedom was bound up in mine. We are bound, bound up in you, bound up in me. We are bound, born of one truth that sets us free. We are bound, bound up in you, bound up in me. We are bound, born of one truth that sets us free. We are bound. After justice, we must chase if we are to ever survive this place. By cherishing you, I'm cherishing me, and all of your love has taught me to see. I must break open my heart, you break open yours too. What once started with me now ends with you, now ends with you. sets us free. We are bound up in you, bound up in me. We are bound up on truth that sets us free. We are bound. We are bound. We are bound.
Thank you, Keisha. States across the country, countries across the world, we are bound here tonight. And thank you, Keisha, for showing us how we can do it. So now, it's our chance to have a conversation. And as we launch into it, I actually invite you to turn your cameras on, if you wish, so we can all see each other. And even if you don't, go on gallery view so you can see everybody. Stay muted for now. But as we head into our conversation, if you have a response, just hit the reaction button at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar and use the raise your hand feature, and we'll do our best to get across the country and across the world and welcome in as many as time allows. Just take a second and just kind of tune in each other and take a second to look, scroll through that gallery and see the number of people that you're seeing state to state. More states checked in. Minnesota checked in, Illinois checked in, Vermont checked in, Maine checked in. Somebody's waving. Give a wave. Give a wave. How often do you get a chance to wave to 300 people from across the world and across your country? The heck with this distance. Let's just see each other. Okay. So to kick it off, what I'd love to just do first is to just put in the chat a word, a phrase, something that just sticks out to you from everything you heard tonight. Representative Evans offered us that great word, listen. What did you hear? Just quickly, and we'll see if we can collect up some of the words we're hearing. Unity, bound, brilliance, hope, together, trust, chase, possibility, be kind, compassion, liberty, leadership. Looking back through, justice comes up quite a bit. Change, bond, goodness, steadfast, mutual understanding, capital letters, heart. A nation is only as strong as its weakest members, somebody's remembering. Courage, shanti, shanti, shanti. Lift in capital letters, your voice. And together again, and courage again. Heal, shalom, rough road back. A lot of positive words, but we have to, as Rabbi Mikva says, remember that it's not idle optimism. It's active faith. And so yes, rough road back, but fellowship, patience, common good, light us up. One of the letter writers, Ibu Patel, founder of the Interfaith Youth Course, said in his letter, we must give to others support, guidance, sustenance. So let's let that conversation do that for each other. So again, I'm going to ask a question, and if somebody wants to respond, just raise your hand, and my friend Sophia is going to point folks out to me. This is a little like a combination of being in an auditorium and doing a talk radio show, if you want to know the truth. So there's both connection and more anonymity than we'd like, but we'll get to you. So a friend told me today that values and voices can remind us what democracy means. So that word has come up a lot in the past month and a half, the past 4 years, maybe your whole life, democracy. I want to know what it means to you in your life in action. Somebody want to respond? What does democracy mean to you in your life in action? There is always in a crowd that brave person who wants to be first. And I'm going to go to Abanaquita Wilborn. I'm hoping I'm saying your first name right. Abanaquita, can you unmute yourself and tell us first where you're from, where you're checking in from, and give us your comment. Can you unmute, Abanaquita? working on that. We've asked her to unmute, and we'll keep going. Is there someone else who has a comment? Polly M. If you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear us now?
We can. Who's this? Polly M?
This is Polly. Polly is here.
Hi.
And Tom.
Polly and Tom. Where are you from, Polly and Tom?
San Diego, California.
Welcome. Welcome. Early out there. We're in Philadelphia in this room.
Well, that's where I was born and raised. So it's part home.
Welcome.
Anyway, democracy. What action for me is to do the actions required to live into what the definition of our forefathers, some of them, had, where we can grow and live together as a people.
Do the actions required. I love that. Do the actions required. What are those actions? Can you name an action that's required?
Stand up against what's wrong. Speak the truth and listen with kind heart.
That's excellent. Polly, anything you want to add sitting next there?
I would just say listen to all, even those we don't necessarily agree with.
Echoing what Congressman Evans said earlier about listening. How do you meet the moment? He said, listen. Thank you. Anyone else want to offer a thought of what is democracy in action to you in your life as we think about this? I'm seeing some comments in the chat. Julie said, democracy, we all count. Joan Farber said, feeling my voice is being heard and that it matters. Steve said, it means inclusion, true and complete inclusion. And Susan Schifrin always asking where the common good lies. And Lucy, and you know, the letter from Eskenazi and Wright pointed to a fair and equitable economy. Lucy checks in one fair wage, at least $15 an hour. And Stacy says being open to the other. Here's another question, and so many of these letters, the letter by Eskenazi and Wright, the letter from Mark Barreto that Nalaja read at the beginning, talk about loving one's neighbor, you know. But letter writer Karina Martin Hogan asks a big question. But what does love of one's neighbor actually look like in the realm of politics? What does love of one's neighbor actually look like in the realm of politics? So what does it look like to you? And how can we make it part of both the politics of DC and the politics of our blocks and neighborhoods? What does love of one neighbor look like in the realm of politics? We've got a raised hand. It says TR Martha. I'm not sure what the TR stands for, but I'm going to ask you to unmute.
It stands for teacher.
Teacher. Thank you, Teacher Martha. Where are you checking in from?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, and maybe a Quaker school?
Yes, I'm retired now, but it was at a Quaker school where everyone in every job was called teacher.
Excellent.
Which was great because then the kids learned that they were being taught by the people in the office at the desks and the people who were cleaning the classrooms, and everyone was their teacher. In thinking about democracy, I think it was just yesterday where I was listening to NPR and I heard a quote. I believe that the show was about intimacy and how in a relationship you develop intimacy, but this quote has been just rolling around. I wrote it down. I stopped what I was doing and I wrote it down because it hit me so hard. And it said that to develop intimacy, you have to listen with curiosity and speak with vulnerability. And the piece about listening with curiosity, I think, is so crucial in a democracy, because I know, I look at thinking of January 6th has been big on our minds lately. And I look at what happened that day and I think, well, I wasn't looking at some of those people as humans, to be honest. And so that whole thing of listening with curiosity is how, in a democracy and in reaching out to your neighbors with love, I think that means that you listen to them with curiosity. You want to learn about who they are. You want to value their personhood. But it's a daily challenge. It's something we will work at every day of our lives.
Yeah, you talk about a daily challenge. I'm reminded of Leah Howard's letter where she talks about, going to a just society is like, it's an exhausting upward climb with little reward, or it can feel like that.
Yes.
But breaking it down into that idea of daily challenge, one day at a time. I'm wondering, as we talk about this, what does love of one neighbor look like in politics? If somebody can describe a step on that upward climb to justice, one step you've taken, one step you've seen a neighbor take, or you read somebody took, or a family member took, is there a step that you can describe that is either about a step on the way to justice or what loving one's neighbor looks like in politics? Anyone want to offer something? As I'll read something that Julie from Indiana, another state we haven't shouted out yet. Welcome, Indiana. Who's your love? Love our neighbor in politics by sticking up for those who are seeking justice. Loving our neighbor by sticking up for those who are seeking justice, or maybe chasing, to use Mark Bretler's term. Michael Zeldin says, not following the majority to do evil. Somebody want to describe something you've seen, a step? We've got one hand that's up, and I'm trying to find it. It is Kathy Schlossmacher. Can you unmute and tell us where you're from, Kathy?
More.
I hear you. I hear a voice. Kathy? You look to be unmuted, Kathy, but we're not hearing you if you're speaking. Look for another hand. Kathy, can you unmute and speak? Or you can put it in the chat. I'm going to read from Massachusetts. Joyce and Lenny Berkman have seen people holding informal workshops on local policy issues in which neighbors discuss their ideas with each other, present their reasoning, their evidence, and their ideas about how a town can address difficult questions. Wow. Presenting reasoning, then evidence, and then ideas about how a town can address difficult questions. Talk about listening and meeting the moment. I want to go, happy to have another person working in government ready to talk with us. I'd like to introduce Pennsylvania State Representative Joe Hohenstein. Joe, can you unmute yourself? Joe, thanks for being with us, and glad to have your voice with us.
Yeah, thank you, David. And thank you for identifying me as a state rep. I wasn't necessarily going to speak from that experience, but I definitely was encouraged to hear the comments about the fact that our work as representatives has to be about allowing and providing voice for those who don't have voices, the most vulnerable. But the thought that strikes me is, in my faith tradition as a Quaker, we're taught to see the light of God in everyone. And to me, that means that everyone has a piece of the truth that they can share. The challenge is recognizing when they're speaking from truth and allowing that then to fit into our broader truth as a society. And I think the idea of combating the lies and the falsehoods with the truth is a difficult one, because none of us has all of the truth. We have to recognize that people speak from their personal experiences. And when they do that, they are speaking from a place of truth. But we also have to be able to teach them when that isn't, when what they see isn't what's actually going on. That's the challenge for me. But I've just been really encouraged by hearing and seeing everyone. Really appreciated the music as well. And And I just thank you for giving me that brief moment to be able to give people my reflections on tonight.
Joe, thanks for being with us. And thanks for your work on behalf of Pennsylvania. And what you say in terms of acknowledging the truth in everyone ties to what Kathy Schlossmacher wanted to say. She put it in the chat about giving everyone a seat at the table. And then it laces back to the Berkmans saying then also, once we're at the table, listening to reasoning, listening to evidence, and as somebody talked about, speaking with vulnerability. So the openness that an idea you might hear might be different from yours, and you can listen strongly to it. Debbie Schultz offers placing interdependence over independence in meeting life's challenges, echoing what Tamara Cohn-Eskenazi and Jacob L. Wright said in their letter. And, you know, I'm a native of Philadelphia, and you might know, if you know Philly, we kind of love the Liberty Bell and lots of imagery and iconography, but the Eskenazi Wright letters gloss on what proclaim liberty, that's not about individual freedom, it's about collective interdependence. That's powerful. And just a couple more from the chat. Jeff Bernhardt offers, I would like to see more modeling of loving one's neighbor by our elected representatives and how they speak and listen with one another. This modeling can only help what happens when voters see them speaking to and with one another with respect. So the idea of what we see in Washington, D.C., what does love one's neighbor look like in politics in D.C., how that can offer a model back to us. We're wanting to honor your time and the light of your time that's in everyone. And we're going to move to wrapping up. The conversation ends on Zoom. The conversation lives on, not just for the next 4 years of a new administration, the next 2 years of the 117th Congress, but that upward climb. We might see it as a curve that could bend towards justice if we chase it. We might see it that way if we're curious, if we're vulnerable. If as Mark Smith, who's watching as he drives across country, says, we see the right use of and sharing power. The right use of and sharing power versus abuse of power. Those are all the ways that the conversation gets to continue. The artists tonight volunteered their time. That's another way loving one's neighbor lives forward, and we want to thank them so much. Nalaja Sun, David Strathairn, Salawat Adam, Zachary Nosenchuk. We thank Congressman Dwight Evans for joining us. Ami Yaris and Bethlehem the Vocationist for sharing their song, Tesha Marie Canales, Michelle Tauber, Angel Desai, and Keisha Hutchins Hurlinger for sharing her song. Thanks to all of you, all the states, all the countries, all the listening, all the curiosity, all the vulnerability, all the light. What can we do to create light together? You did it. Thank you. And a huge thanks, and one final word, from the visionaries behind American Values, Religious Voices, co-founder and creative director Lisa Weinberger. And here now to conclude the evening with a prayer for our country from the book, American Values, Religious Voices, 100 Days, 100 Letters, which you can get at valuesandvoices.com. Please welcome, to close us out, campaign founder, Rabbi Andrea L. Weiss.
Thank you, David. And David Bradley, I want to thank you for your vision and your energy for bringing all of us, not only all of us on the Values and Voices team and all of our amazing performers, but everyone on this call for bringing us together for this uplifting evening. And we conclude now with a prayer for our country compiled from lines from the 2017 Values and Voices letters. A prayer for our country. Every inch of America is sacred, from sea to shining sea. There is much to be done in our time, the sort of hard work on which God smiles, because it is done for the sake of the dignity and well-being of all God's creatures. Together, let us work to preserve and make manifest the values upon which our democracy was founded. The task of all people of faith is to call governing authorities to fulfill God's purpose of bringing about justice, mercy, and peace. Individually and as a nation, may we heed our obligations to each other as we navigate the tensions of building a just society. Rather than a politics of divisiveness, may we move our country toward a politics of empathy. May we use our power well so we do great things for all God's creatures, all those made in God's image who yearn for an equal place at America's table. And if we do all this, may grace and peace be ours in abundance. May we be a beacon and a blessing to the world.